You've always been like this, ever since you were a kid. All the kids are sitting normally, they're playing, but you've always wanted more than other kids, as if you were better than the others." Erin remained silent. She knew that when her stepmother was in such a mood, it was better not to argue with her. Actually, Melissa was not a bad woman. When she started living with Erin's father and moved into their house with her son Dave, who was only a year older than Erin, the children always received the same care and punishment from her. Everything was fair. Stepmother was easily provoked, but also easily calmed down, unlike her father, who required much more effort to anger. But if Sean lost his temper, everyone suffered. Therefore, it was easier for Erin and Dave to confess their childish pranks to Melissa. She, of course, would first clutch her heart and start lamenting. However, after the light punishment, the misbehaviour of the children was never mentioned again. But when the stepmother learned that her stepdaughter planned to go to the city after school to study, she couldn't calm down for a long time. The father, of course, was also not delighted, but as usual, he did not express any of his feelings. Melissa initially hoped that Erin would come to her senses and stay in their native village, just like Dave did. But unlike her stepbrother, the girl always knew that her place was not there. She dreamed of going to the city and becoming a clothing designer or stylist. Erin was not actually sure what her future profession would be called, but she was sure that she would make people beautiful, just like her mother. She didn't remember her mother very well. She left when Erin was 7 years old. But whenever the girl thought of her, the image of a light fairy from a fairy tale would come to mind. Big blue eyes, blonde hair similar to Erin's own, a slim figure, fair skin, a gentle voice and a dreamy gaze. In their village, Erin's mother seemed like a creature from another world. She didn't know how to tend the garden or feed the chickens. Daddy did all the housework, and sometimes his mother would help. The woman did not like her daughter-in-law, who was completely unadapted to village life, and she often used swear words to remember the day when her son brought her from the city. Erin's mother loved doing only 2 things, singing and sewing clothes, and Erin still kept the dresses made by her mum's hands from her childhood. Unfortunately, when Erin was 7, her mum disappeared. The girl couldn't understand what had happened for a long time. She kept asking her father where her mum was and when she would come back. He remained silent. Finally, her grandmother provided an answer. "She left you and ran back to the city. She couldn't live here. I told Sean right away that she was no match for him. She didn't belong here. I hope we'll raise you to be a good person, not like your good-for-nothing mother." And soon after she found her son a second wife. A simple, frugal woman experienced in family matters. "Here is Melissa," she said to Sean. "She's a good woman. She has already given birth to a son, buried her husband, and yet she manages the household just fine." Sean obeyed and they got married. And although, in some sense, Melissa replaced Erin's mother, the girl never forgot about her real mother. Deep down, she was sure that as soon as she arrived in the city, she would find her. Surely, her mother had already become a famous fashion designer, and Erin would follow in her footsteps. They would meet at a fashion show, and her mother would recognize her and be proud. And so, the day of departure finally arrived. Even the loud displeasure of her stepmother, who accompanied her to the bus, could not spoil Erin's mood. Melissa placed her stepdaughter in the best seat she could find and made sure the old suitcase was neatly placed in the luggage compartment. "All right," she said sternly, glancing gloomily out of the window. "Write to us once you're settled in." Suddenly Melissa bent over abruptly and awkwardly kissed her stepdaughter on the cheek. Then, as if startled by her own emotions, she quickly recoiled and got off the bus. Erin saw her rapidly retreating figure through the window. "She's good," the girl suddenly thought. although not my own mother. The next morning, Erin diligently studied the list of those admitted to the college, only to find that her name was not on it. "Didn't get in?" A tall, skinny, red-headed girl with funny glasses asked sympathetically. "It's just a mistake," said Erin confidently. "I'm sure they should have accepted me." The red-haired girl shrugged. "Since you're confident, go to the dean's office and find out for sure. If you like, I'll walk you there." Erin nodded. As they walked down the narrow, dark corridor, she asked the new acquaintance her name and if she had been accepted into this college. "My name is Jill. No, I didn't get in because I wasn't going to. I was just walking by. It's hot outside, so I thought I'd come inside and sit in the cooler room for a while. It's interesting to look at the applicants, how they are happy and sad." Erin was surprised at this way of spending time, but decided not to show it, especially as they were approaching the dean's office. "Well, good luck," Jill said. "I'll wait for you here." Erin knocked cautiously. From the other side of the door came a muffled voice. "Come in." In the office sat a short, dense, grey-haired man with glasses. "Hello, I'm here about enrolment. It seems they forgot to put me on the list of those who passed the exams." The dean looked up and looked surprised at the brave girl, but nevertheless asked for her last name and first name. Just a moment. He pulled up a thick pile of sheets, flipped through it with quick, honed movements, found the one he wanted and read it carefully from beginning to end. He frowned and looked at Erin. "There is no mistake, you did not enter." Seeing the girl's face, he added softly, "Try again next year, only prepare properly." Erin nodded dumbfoundedly and left the office. Jill, as promised, was waiting for her in the corridor, looking at the stand with the history of the department with interest. "Well," she asked, "did you figure it out?" Erin nodded, feeling tears coming to her eyes. "I didn't get in." "Oh, I'm sorry, don't worry. You'll definitely get in next year. My older sister got into university only the second time, but nevertheless, she's graduated with honours." Erin smiled, strained. "Thank you. All right, let's get out of here." Outside, as luck would have it, the weather was particularly nice. The sun was shining dazzlingly, birds were singing, and the flowers in the flower bed outside the college filled the air with a lusciously sweet scent, as if no one in the world cared that Erin's dreams had just been shattered. "Where are you going now?" Jill asked. "Maybe we should go the same way. In fact, I'd like to have a coffee right now, and a little snack. Would you like to join me?" "I'm going to the train station," Erin said, and lightly shook the hand in which she held the suitcase. "I came here from the village." "And there are no relatives here?" Jill asked in surprise. "My mum lives here," Erin wanted to say, but held back and only shook her head negatively. Jill looked at her thoughtfully, as if pondering something. Finally, she asked, "Do you want to go back home to the village?" "No," replied Erin. "Then let's go and drink coffee, and we'll figure it out." They went to a small red car. Jill threw Erin's suitcase in the trunk, and they went to drink coffee. 15 minutes later, the girls were sitting on the terrace of a cosy cafe. "Delicious coffee," said Erin. "Thank you for treating me." "You're welcome. What was your plan, in case you didn't get in?" Erin sighed and lowered her eyes. "I didn't have a plan. I was sure I'd get in." "Gee, life is so unpredictable. You have to be ready for anything." Jill shook her head. Meanwhile, Erin continued, "I don't want to go back to the village, Jill, but there are no other options. I thought I'd study, live in a dormitory, get a job." "Okay, Erin, here's my plan. You can live with me, find a job, and prepare for enrolment the next year." Erin looked at her incredulously. "Why do you need it?" Jill shrugged her skinny, pale shoulders covered with freckles and replied, "Why not?" Jill lived in a large 3-bedroom apartment on the first floor of an old 9-story building. But as soon as Erin entered, she immediately felt an atmosphere of coziness. In the first room there was a piano with stacks of yellowed sheets with notes on it. Next to it was an old chair, upholstered in cracked brown leather. Opposite the instrument near the wall was a couch, and above it hung bookshelves with a few photo frames interspersed with dusty old books. "Your parents?" Erin asked. Jill nodded and replied, "My dad's an opera singer, and my mum's a diplomat, like my older sister." "Wow," said Erin, dumbfounded. Jill only shrugged. The second bedroom was Jill's bedroom. There was a large bed, a tall, ceiling-high wooden closet, and shelves with many dolls. "Mum brought them back from every trip," Jill explained. Erin remembered that she had only 2 dolls as a child. The first was a bald baby doll, which she believed her mum had bought for her back in the day. The second was a Barbie doll her stepmother had given her as a Christmas gift. Jill said thoughtfully, "You will live in the 3rd bedroom. It's kind of my guest room." The 3rd bedroom had a fold-out couch, a wide, squat dark dresser, and a desk and chair. "Okay, get your stuff sorted out for now. Take the towel and linens in the dresser. Don't be shy. The bathroom and toilet are just to the right of the front door. Get some rest. Maybe you need to sleep or just lie down. I'll do my own thing, and then we'll go to my friend's summer house tonight." Erin had never been to a country house, especially one so big and beautiful. The huge 2-story wooden house was full of cheerful young guys and girls, most of whom seemed too drunk and loud. Jill felt like she belonged in this company. She introduced Erin to everyone, presenting her as her new friend and future clothing designer. Erin smiled shyly and wished she could disappear. Distractedly taking the plastic cup of wine in her hand, she stepped aside, then saw the back door to the yard open and slipped in. It was much quieter outside. There was a couple hugging on the bench near the porch, but further back in the garden, where a white gazebo stood between the trees, there seemed to be no one. That's where Erin went. She sat down on a bench, put a glass of wine on the railing and closed her eyes. Suddenly a pleasant male voice came from above her. "Why is such a fairy sad alone?" Erin opened her eyes and saw a tall, handsome guy. "My name's Joshua, so why are you bored?" he asked. "And I'm Erin. I don't know anyone there. Also, everyone's been drinking a lot." Joshua raised his eyebrows and sat down next to her. "It's beautiful here, isn't it?" he said. "Yes, it's beautiful," Erin agreed, but under the gaze of his dark eyes she felt both hot and cold. She wanted him to leave, or, on the contrary, to sit here with her until morning. A month passed. "Jill, get up, you're going to be late for work." Erin pounded insistently on her friend's door. No one answered, so Erin went in. Jill was sleeping sweetly, with her head covered with a blanket, from under which only her left heel was sticking out. Erin tickled her. Jill shrieked and threw off the blanket, sitting on the bed and wiping her eyes unhappily. "How did you get so much strength, Erin? I heard that you came back just in the morning. Did you go out with Joshua again? Haven't you had enough of him for a month yet?" Erin smiled embarrassedly. "And you were reading again till morning, weren't you?" Jill stretched and said, "Well, yes. Ben gave me his new novel to review. It's still a draft, but it's already entertaining. Okay, let's have a quick breakfast. I'll drop you off at work on time." "Then you wash up," Erin said. "And I've made breakfast. I'll set the table." In the kitchen, Jill asked, "Do you regret working as a cleaner? Just tell me and I'll find something more suitable for you at my work." Erin shook her head. "No, I like everything, and I can learn a lot there, even just by listening to my boss yell at her assistants." "Well, if that's the case, I won't interfere with your learning process," joked Jill. A month later, when Erin woke up in her new friend's apartment after a weekend spent at the summer house, it became clear to her that she needed to look for a job immediately. Although Jill said that she didn't have to pay for housing, she still needed money for groceries, transportation, and everything else. but who would hire a young girl without an education? For some reason, Erin remembered the words of her stepmother at that moment. Melissa had said those words to her son Dave, who had graduated from school and didn't know where to find work. There's plenty of work everywhere. If you want to find a job, go outside and look around. That's precisely what Erin did. She walked around for 2 hours exploring the city, admiring the tall buildings and the big green parks. When she was already tired and headed home, her eyes fell on a small ad on the door. Full-time cleaner wanted in Cassandra's fashion house. The sign for Cassandra's fashion house was beautiful. It had huge, sleek, white glossy letters on a black background. A high, white marble porch led through transparent doors into a hall with a ceiling adorned with paintings of flowers, clouds, angels, and warriors on horseback. Erin wanted to examine everything in detail, but a high-pitched female voice interrupted her thoughts. "Young lady, who are you?" A slender woman in an airy white blouse and a very tight black skirt approached her. "Hello," said Erin. "I'm here about the ad. Do you need a cleaner?" "Yes, but we have very strict requirements. Not just anyone can do it." Then the woman gestured for Erin to follow. Together they walked through the snow-white hall, which was almost empty except for mannequins and clothes racks along the walls. At the back of the hall there was a massive wooden table piled with colourful fabric pieces, buttons of different shapes and sizes, brooches, belts and more. There was a large black leather armchair behind the desk where a woman in her 60s was sitting and smoking. She had very short grey hair and attentive black eyes that scanned Erin from head to toe. "I'm ready to start working today," Erin said. Cassandra grinned. "Actually, we have one requirement. Clean well and do as you're told. The main thing is to be indispensable. A quiet, hard-working mouse." "I can do that," Erin said confidently. Cassandra looked at her assistant. "Latrice, did you hear her? Hire the girl." Then she took a drag on her cigarette and tucked some drawings and photos into a black leather folder. "Let's go," Latrice whispered to Erin, barely moving her lips. And so, the girl, who had arrived from the village just a few days ago, became a cleaner in one of the city's best fashion houses. Only after seeing everything from the inside did Erin realise how different her idea of style, fashion and clothing design was from the reality. She understood why she hadn't been accepted into a fashion school. Erin strictly complied with Cassandra's requirements to be as quiet as water and as low as grass. She silently wiped mirrors, dusted and collected fabric scraps, while catching every word her boss said. She tried to memorize every image created in the studio, and although she worked from morning until evening every day, she never felt tired, especially since Joshua would take her out in the evenings. Erin had never met someone like Joshua before. He was spectacular, energetic, easygoing and always in a good mood. All the men in her village, regardless of their age, always seemed preoccupied with something, usually thinking about how to make money and how to spend it on alcohol. But Joshua took her to a new place every day. In the span of a month, she looked at the city at night from an observation deck, rode horses, touched dolphins at the dolphinarium, and strolled through the botanical garden. Within a week, Erin realised that she had fallen in love. True, Joshua hadn't said anything about his love to her, but she could see that he felt the same way. It felt like all those years of living in the village with a strict stepmother and a cold father, impoverished and without love or attention, were finally over. Now everything would be fine in her life. In addition to work and meetings with Joshua, Erin diligently prepared for enrollment. She started studying all the textbooks she could get her hands on. One day, she cautiously approached Latrice and timidly expressed her desire to learn more about fashion and style. "Follow me," the assistant said nonchalantly, leading Erin into a dusty back room. There were piles of folders, magazines and drawings. "These are the archives of our fashion house," she explained. "Study them, memorize them. Some even have Cassandra's notes on them. Erin, you're a good girl and good at your job. We haven't had a cleaner last longer than 3 weeks. I can see that you catch every word Cassandra says. And that's right." Erin decided to come clean. "I want to be a fashion designer too, and I plan to go to college next year to try it out." Latrice said thoughtfully. "What's there to say? The road will be travelled by the one who walks it. So don't waste any time. Learn everything from the very basics, perfect your drawing, and move on to our archives." Erin had never felt so happy. The next day was her day off. Joshua had promised to pick her up in the evening and surprise her. In the morning she did not want to get up at all. After all, the past month was very busy, and she didn't want to miss the opportunity to lie in bed as much as she wanted. She had never had that luxury at home. Her stepmother always woke her and Dave up bright and early and assigned them chores. Erin still remembers how she spent the whole morning making dumplings on the eve of her birthday. The thought of dumplings made her nauseous. The girl opened her eyes and finally shook off sleep. Then Erin jumped up and ran to the bathroom. "Jill," she said indignantly to her friend, entering the kitchen, "I can smell from the bedroom that these eggs are spoiled. Why are you frying them?" Jill looked up from her book in surprise and walked over to the skillet, sniffing it with her nose. "I bought them yesterday. What makes you think they're not fresh?" The smell of them made me sick. Erin opened the window wide and the fresh air made her feel better. Jill frowned. "Interesting. Take a test, please. Take it from my shelf in the bathroom." Erin looked at her friend in surprise, but obediently followed her suggestion. A little later, when Jill had already put breakfast on plates, Erin returned to the kitchen. "2 stripes," she said, stunned. "Wow. I don't know what to say. It depends on whether you are expecting it or not." "I wasn't expecting it," Erin admitted honestly, "but I'm pleased, and I think Joshua will be happy too." "Great then." Jill cheered for her friend. "And now, pregnant woman, let's have breakfast." All day long, Erin walked in high spirits. The news was unexpected for her, but it turned out that this is how it should be. "I have to tell my father and stepmother," Erin thought, and at that moment she remembered that she still hadn't told them that she hadn't gone to college. She felt ashamed. How could she have forgotten to call them? Her father must think that she had become conceited or had run away like her mother. She also remembered how Melissa had kissed her goodbye and told her to call more often. Okay, at least now she had a story to tell. She had a job, she was actively preparing for enrollment, she had a fiancé, and she would have a child. In the evening, Joshua was late. He was supposed to pick her up half an hour ago. "Call him," Jill said. "What if his car broke down or something?" "I don't have his phone number," Erin said. "What do you mean?" Jill didn't believe her, thinking she had misheard. "I don't know. Somehow I didn't ask his number. We saw each other almost every day and agreed in advance when we would meet next time. And during the day he is at work, so there isn't enough time to talk." Jill frowned. "And where does he work? Do you know?" "No." Okay, what's his last name?" "I haven't asked," Erin replied, almost crying. "Okay." Jill came to her friend and hugged her. "Let's wait until tomorrow. If he doesn't show up, let's go to his house." Erin walked around the room. "Jill, what if something bad happened to him?" "Erin, nothing could have happened to him. So we wait until tomorrow, and then we go to his place." That night, Erin hardly slept at all. Images of Joshua getting into an accident, being attacked by hooligans, or the elevator rope breaking flashed in her mind. She slept for a couple of hours and woke up early, feeling completely exhausted. Jill? She knocked cautiously on Jill's door. Erin, it's Sunday, 8 o'clock in the morning. Let's get at least another hour of sleep. Let's go, please. I can't take it any more. Okay. Jill sleepily stretched and looked at her worried friend. I can't say no to a pregnant woman. Erin was desperately knocking on the door of Joshua's apartment, but no one opened. She hadn't taken her finger off the doorbell button for probably 5 minutes. Jill stood nearby, growing increasingly gloomy. I guess we should call the police, Erin said. What if he's lying there on the floor unconscious? Well, yes, Jill said in a strangely colourless tone. At that moment, the door to the apartment across the hall opened. What's with all the noise in the early morning? Asked a sleepy woman in her mid-40s wearing a robe, unhappily. I'm sorry, Erin turned to her. We're just concerned because the person who lives here won't open the door. We're worried that something bad might have happened to him. Why are you looking for him here? The neighbour asked, even more disgruntled. He moved out yesterday. He left with his bags. This wasn't his apartment? Jill clarified. No, of course not. He must have rented it for about a year. I see, Jill said. Thank you. Let's leave, Erin. She firmly took Erin's elbow and led her towards the elevator. I don't understand anything, Erin said as they headed home. How could he just leave without saying anything? Jill pressed her lips together, gripping the steering wheel even tighter. It was as if she struggled with herself for a while, but she finally said, Erin, I'm sorry to have to tell you this, but I don't think there's anything wrong with Joshua. He only used you when it was convenient for him, and now he has apparently moved on to other things and other women. How could you say that about him? Jill braked sharply and parked. She turned to her friend and looked at her. Erin, wake up. Do you think it's normal to date someone for a month and not know anything about them? No last name, no place of work, no phone number. Do you think it just happened accidentally? Erin remained silent. Jill saw tears streaming down the girl's cheeks. All her anger suddenly vanished. I'm sorry, she said. I didn't mean to hurt you. I just don't want you to live in an illusion and make excuses for him. The tears continued to flow and her mind was blank. Strangely enough, at that moment, Erin didn't feel any pain. Instead, everything inside her seemed frozen. 2 months passed. I wish I could go with you to the ultrasound, Jill sighed, but I really need to be at work. Don't worry, I feel fine, and it's only a 4-stop bus ride from work, Erin said, struggling to button up her jacket. By the way, how did your boss react to your pregnancy? Jill asked, finishing her coffee. Erin let out a sigh. Cassandra doesn't know yet. I don't think she sees anything beyond outfits, and she certainly doesn't pay attention to some cleaning lady. Latrice, on the other hand, has her suspicions. I guess I can hide it somehow for another month or 2, and then that's it. I'm afraid they'll fire me if they find out. That's illegal, so don't worry. If they try anything, I'll report them to the Labour Inspectorate. And remember, I've told you many times, you can live with me for as long as you want, even if you're not working. You don't have to go back to that village. Have you told your parents? I've only told them that I didn't get in college and I got a job. And them? Scolded? Called you back? Oddly enough, no, Erin chuckled. Actually, my stepmother replied. I don't know what my father really thinks, but she said not to get upset and that I could definitely enroll next year. It's really strange, to be honest. Well, maybe she missed you and realised how difficult it is to manage the household without a helping hand. I'd like to meet your family, but later. Erin smiled at her friend and went to work. It was on that day that she realised that her boss had noticed the changes in her appearance, even though Erin tried to hide it. When the workday was over, Cassandra called her into her office. She's probably going to fire me, Erin thought, wiping her sweaty palms on her pants. Cassandra, as usual, was smoking, and looking at the sketches spread out on the table in front of her. "Have a seat, Erin," she said, pointing to the chair beside her. Erin sat down, trying to suck in her belly as much as possible, although it was no longer possible. "Which one?" Cassandra asked, sliding 2 pictures towards her. "For the window display?" "Yes, it will be placed in the centre." Confidently, Erin pointed to the photo on the left. "Why?" Cassandra asked. "It looks more vibrant. The second image seems casual, but this one reflects the collection you've been working on." Erin hesitated for a second but continued. "And I also think it creates a kind of New Year's atmosphere. People will look at it and immediately feel that the holiday is approaching." Cassandra said thoughtfully, looking at the picture again. "Not bad. By the way, I called you here for a reason. Would you be interested in moving up to a junior assistant position?" Erin was surprised as she looked at her boss, but Cassandra appeared completely serious. "Of course," answered Erin. "Great. Don't be surprised. Latrice told me about your plans for the fashion world. I'm not blind myself. I can see that you don't miss a single word. And by the way, soon you can't wash the floors with your belly." "So you know?" asked Erin in surprise. "Sweetheart," Cassandra sighed. "I'm old, sure, but I'm not blind yet." "You're not going to fire me?" Erin cautiously asked. "Did you even listen to what I've told you?" "Yes, but—" "So that's it. Return to your work now." Cassandra abruptly opened the sketch folder and focused her gaze on it. Erin already knew it was best not to approach her boss at times like this. She carefully stood up, whispered, "Thank you," and left. Later that evening, Erin stood at the bus stop and waited for the bus. She stepped from foot to foot to keep warm. There was only one elderly lady at the bus stop. Although Erin didn't like staring at strangers, this woman caught her attention. She was wearing a long, red plaid woolen coat, and in her arm sat a big black cat, who was carefully watching Erin with big green eyes. Finally the bus arrived and Erin and the old woman got on. "Payment at the entrance," the driver shouted sharply, almost causing the girl to drop her bag. Erin paid, walked through, and sat in the first seat of the empty bus. The elderly woman stopped in the aisle, made the cat comfortable, and began searching for something in a small, beaded black purse. "Hurry up, please," asked the impatient driver. "Just a moment," replied the old lady politely. "There's a coin somewhere in here." The driver let out a loud, defiant sigh. The elderly woman searched her bag even more diligently, while the cat meowed unhappily. "Take it," Erin said, holding out the money to the driver. He grumbled but said nothing. The girl returned to her seat, and the elderly woman sat down next to her. "Thank you, my dear." "You're welcome." "Are you going for an ultrasound?" the woman asked. "How did you guess?" The woman smiled, stroked the cat, and gestured towards Erin's belly with her eyes. "It's not hard. For now, almost no one notices yet, because the term is small. I have an experienced eye. I can tell you something else interesting." The black cat suddenly stood up, stretched, and climbed from the old woman's lap to Erin's lap. "That's a good sign," said its mistress. "Usually he doesn't approach strangers, but he likes you." Erin stroked the cat. Its fur was warm, almost hot. "What do you want to tell me?" The elderly woman smiled, closed her eyes, and began to sway slightly forward and backward. "You yourself were an accidental child, but brought much joy by your birth. You will find a mother twice more. First falsely, then truly. The path you have chosen is the right one. Follow it. Name your daughter Holly. Don't go back to the past. Look to the future." The elderly woman's voice, so sing-song smooth and quiet, as if led Erin into some kind of trance. She heard everything, understood everything, but it was as if time had slowed down and every word of the unexpected prediction was etched into her memory. "Girl," came the familiar rough voice of the driver. "Girl, this is your stop. You're getting off here, aren't you?" Erin looked out the window. Yes, it was the right stop. She hadn't even noticed when the bus stopped, and the most amazing thing was that the old lady with the cat in the next seat was no longer there. "The baby is developing perfectly. All indicators are normal. I don't see any pathology," said the doctor, a beautiful young woman who explained in understandable words what she was doing and the results of the examination. "You're having a girl." Erin remembered the strange woman's words. "Name your daughter Holly." Once home, Erin happily laid down on the sofa and closed her eyes. Finally she could relax after a day full of events and reflect on everything. Her feelings towards fortune-tellers, clairvoyants and other mystics was hard to define. I should remember what the old lady with the cat said. Name your daughter Holly. It's a beautiful name. Joshua would like it. Every time Erin thought of Joshua, her heart clenched with pain. She instinctively placed her hand on her belly. She would never admit it to Jill, but deep down she still held on to the hope that he would return. She had even dreamt of him a few times, and in each dream he assured her that it wasn't his fault he had to leave her, and that they would be together forever now that he was back. "You will find your mother twice more, the first time falsely, then truly." Erin recalled more of the old woman's words. Amidst everything that had happened, the search for her mother had taken a back seat. Perhaps it was now worth pursuing, starting with her father. Most likely he would know her mum's relatives, friends, her old workplace, or some addresses. Without delay, Erin went to her hometown. As she walked along the familiar street, she felt a strange sensation. It was as if she had never left, and yet had never been there before. The small old wooden houses, smoke billowing from chimneys, shaggy dogs barking at the bus, women in warm scarves and men in boots, felt both close and distant. It was as if Erin had seen it all in a past life. Upon seeing her house, she realized how much had changed in the past 6 months. She had left as a little girl, a schoolgirl of yesterday, and returned as a future mother. "Erin! Erin is here!" Her half-brother's voice rang out. Dave was chopping wood when he spotted her. He dropped the axe and ran to her. With his ruddy cheeks and hair sticking to his forehead, he embraced his half-sister tightly, lifting her up and spinning her around. "Dave, let me go!" Erin laughed. "I'm very glad to see you, too. Are our parents at home?" Dave nodded and they entered the house. Dave kept his huge arm around Erin's shoulder and didn't want to let go the entire way. Erin felt suddenly ashamed that she hadn't called him once during this time. Her half-brother had always treated her like a sibling. Inside she was greeted by her stepmother, standing by the flower-covered table, cooking as usual. Her father was not in sight, likely sitting in front of the TV. "Mum, Erin's here!" Dave shouted. Melissa turned her head and gasped. For a moment it seemed as if the stepmother was pleased with her, and even as if she wanted to embrace her stepdaughter. But after a second, as if embarrassed by her impulse, she put her hands to her sides and spoke, pretending to be angry. "Well, look who's come to us, all of a sudden. For half a year I've hardly heard a word, and now you just drop in unexpectedly, like snow on my head." The stepmother took a noisy breath as if regaining composure and continued, "Come in, take off your coat. Why are you standing there? It's as if you've never been here before. And come to the fireplace quickly, you're freezing. Your nose is white. Dave, make her some tea with ginger." Erin's father appeared in the kitchen. He wiped his eyes, confused, and didn't immediately realize what the commotion was about. When he saw his daughter, he didn't even smile. "Hi, Daddy," Erin said and hugged him. The father hummed oddly, barely hugging his daughter back. "Sit in the living room for now," Melissa commanded. "We'll be having dinner soon." Erin, her father, and her stepbrother made their way into the living room. The father turned up the volume on the TV and returned to watching his favourite programme. Dave asked, How's work going?" "It's fine. They even promised me a promotion. I'll be a junior assistant now. And how about you?" The young man shrugged. "Fine. I'm home for now. After the new year, I'll go to the north for a 3-month shift." "Wow," Erin wondered. Her brother looked pleased. "Mum's worried," he said. "It's as if you aren't happy with this idea either. But I'm glad. I'll make money, and I can finally see the world outside our hometown." Erin suddenly realised that Dave probably never went farther than their village. She decided to tell her stepmother about her pregnancy the next day, especially since Melissa had been suspiciously eyeing her the day before. Each member of the family reacted differently to the news. Dave was happy to become an uncle. The stepmother gasped and said, "Oh my God, I knew it." The father simply got up and went outside. Dave calmed Erin with a nod and followed his stepfather. "It's nothing," Melissa said. "He'll come to his senses. Currently he's just a little shocked, of course." Erin suddenly realised that she could take advantage of the impact her news had made and talk to her stepmother. "Melissa," she began timidly, "did my father ever tell you about my mother?" Her stepmother looked at her unhappily, frowned and answered, "Yes, when we began to communicate." "Please tell me everything you know. It's not like he'll ever tell me, and I'm an adult, I have a right to know." The stepmother looked at Erin's belly and sighed. "Okay, you're going to be a mother yourself soon. It's not good for you to be carrying all that weight with your own mother for so many years." Erin felt her heart racing. Was she really about to find out what had happened to her mum? "I don't know all the details," Melissa began. "Sean told me once when he was drunk, and it was a long time ago. In general, they met when your father came to the city to take a chauffeur's course. He seemed to like your mother right away. Sean said he didn't understand why she paid attention to him. It was clear that the girl was from a rich family. It was quite a strange story. She either quarrelled with her parents, or they went somewhere, or died. Anyway, she and Sean hit it off rapidly, and by the time he passed the exam and was about to leave, she suddenly said to him, 'I want to live with you, and I want to live in the village.' They got married quickly, and almost immediately it turned out that your mum was pregnant. Well, and when she left, you probably remember." Erin nodded. She remembered it very well. "Didn't father say why she left?" Melissa shrugged. He only said that it quickly became clear to him that she didn't belong here. At first, Sean hoped his wife would adjust to village life. He even took all the housework on himself and sat with you when he could. But no, your mother was very homesick. It was as if nothing pleased her. "Not even me?" said Erin quietly. Melissa reached out her hand as if she wanted to pet Erin, but took it back halfway. "Sean said she loved you. That's why she lived with him for so many years. But she was getting worse every day. He knew that one day she would leave, and so she did." "I want to find her," Erin said. "There must still be some addresses, phone numbers, where she lived when they met. And her parents, my grandparents, didn't they ever come to visit us?" "No." Father's voice came from behind him. He entered somehow unnoticed, and the women even flinched at his voice. The father walked heavily, sat down at a vacant table and began to narrate, looking absently at his daughter. "I tried to find her. There were no cell phones back then. The only address I knew was her then apartment, which she rented with a friend. 8 years later, other people lived there, and no one had heard of your mother. Her parents, I've never seen either. As if she had a big fight with them and hasn't spoken to them for months at the time of our meeting. I don't even know if they know they have a granddaughter. I think while she lived in the village, she didn't communicate with anyone from the city. Her parents seemed to be wealthy people. I have no other information." "So there's no way to find her?" Erin asked. Her father frowned. "If she wanted to, in so many years she could have already come here herself, if not to me then at least to you, or at least sent a birthday card." The trip to the village left Erin with mixed impressions. She had hoped so much that she would find a clue as to how to get on her mother's trail. And as much as she hated to admit it, her father's words had hurt her deeply. Surely her mother could have visited her in all those years, and since she hadn't, she didn't want to see her. Well, she would soon have a daughter of her own, and Erin would take care of her. "Tell me, how was your trip?" Jill asked her. After listening to her friend's long story, she sighed. "Well, what is there to say? I guess your father is right. And really, you have many other things to do now. There's a promotion coming up at work, isn't there?" "Yeah," Erin smiled, as the thoughts of work were nice. "Of course, it's only called beautifully junior assistant. In fact, there will be almost no difference in salary. Yes, and the work will consist mainly of bringing and serving." "You'll pass everything," Jill said confidently. "You'll be one step closer to your dream. It's not like scrubbing floors." "You're right, as always. All in all, I'm happy with everything. I just miss Joshua sometimes." Erin looked at Jill, knowing that she would be unhappy at the mention of her failed fiancé, but she suddenly suggested, "I've been thinking, maybe we should ask my acquaintances, those who were at the summer cottage when you met. Someone must have brought him there. You must know someone close to him, or a friend, maybe his parents, his brothers or sisters." "Don't, Jill. I was thinking the same thing. But he's like my mum. If he wanted to, he would have contacted me a long time ago. So when I find him, what am I going to say? 'Hi, Joshua, you're a scoundrel. Here's our daughter. Pay alimony.'" Erin shook her head. "No way. Holly is my daughter. I don't want him to have any rights over her. I'll raise her myself. If she asks who her father is, I'll tell her everything I know." Jill sighed. "Okay, that's up to you. I'll help you in any way I can." Time passed. One day at work, Latrice approached Erin and asked, "Erin, when is your due date?" "Around the beginning of May," replied the girl. "Oh, that's not soon enough." "That's great. Just in time to model in the spring show of Cassandra's new collection." "Modelling?" Erin thought she'd misheard. "I'm not a model, and my belly's already huge." "Just what she needs," Latrice said nonchalantly. "Cassandra is developing a maternity collection and wants to present it in late winter. And she wants you as a model. Don't worry, it's nothing complicated. We'll get you ready. There's not enough time. Meanwhile, here's a list of tomorrow's new responsibilities. You're no longer a cleaning lady, but a junior assistant. Basically, you do whatever I or Cassandra tells you to do. You'll be preparing clothes, shoes, coordinating fittings, making sure all the supplies are in sufficient quantities, and much more. By the way, how long do you plan to work for?" "As long as I can. I'm feeling great and the doctor said it's okay." "That's great. Of course, after the birth you'll be on maternity leave, we all understand that. But keep in mind, Cassandra won't be expecting you for long." "I understand," Erin replied, but she really had no idea what to do. Jill can't babysit, she works. There is no money for a nanny. Who else should I ask? The father? I don't think he'd agree, thought Erin. For a moment, the thought flashed that Jill was right, and that it would be possible to find Joshua and ask for help. He obviously had a lot of money. But Erin was disgusted when she imagined that he would refuse her, or start lying, or justify himself, or say that it wasn't his child. Surely he was counting on never seeing her again. No, Erin was not going to impose. There was a lot of work for the new position. Erin even sometimes thought that staying as a cleaner would involve much less work. But the girl did not complain. She felt great, and at work she was ready to even spend the night. And everything went easily and well with her, as it happens when a person is engaged in their favourite work. Of course, pregnancy made its own adjustments. It was necessary to visit doctors, attend courses for pregnant women, buy things and furniture that would be needed for the future baby. And then there was also preparation for enrolment. One evening, the friends were sitting in front of the TV, watching an old romantic comedy and eating ice cream straight from the big plastic tubs. "Isn't it weird for you?" asked Erin to Jill. "Basically, you and I are complete strangers to each other. We met by chance, and now I've been living in your apartment for more than 6 months. And I've got a baby on the way. Of course, for me, you are an angel who came from heaven, saved me in the most difficult moment. Without you, I would have sat in the village, listening to my stepmother's lectures and milking cows. I'll always be grateful to you, except that sometimes I feel like some kind of parasite who has entered the trust for a good man who lives off him." Jill licked her spoon and shrugged. "No, this situation doesn't seem strange to me at all. Or are you tricking me, plotting to clean me out?" "Of course no," Erin replied with a smile. "Well, that's just fine," Jill said. "I am helping you because I want to and can do it. Remember, a person helps you only if he or she wants to do it, because we always have the right to refuse. I like being friends with you. I'm not the easiest person to get along with, even if it doesn't seem that way at first glance. And you, how can I put it, balance me out well. I don't feel any discomfort from your being here. On the contrary, only joy. Thank you, Jill. I hope someday I'll be able to repay you in kind." "You're already paying," the girl said. "You buy groceries, clean the house. I'm not even talking about the fact that you've practically relieved me of cooking. I hate cooking, and in the future I plan to tell everyone that I once lived with a celebrity from the world of high fashion." Erin laughed. "All right, tell about it. As for cooking, I like it. I'm also thinking about the future when my daughter is born. First time, of course, I'll stay at home. I don't know, a month? 2, 3? Latrice has made it clear that Cassandra won't be expecting me long from maternity leave." "Wait," Jill clarified. "I thought you'd be gaining experience with them until you go to college." "There's a correspondence department. Then I could stay working at the fashion house and study." "Yes, that would be perfect," Jill nodded. "But that's just my dream." Erin sighed sadly. "I haven't yet had the opportunity to prove myself enough for Cassandra to say, 'Yes, that's our future star. I'll leave her on any terms.'" "First of all," Jill said sternly, "dreaming is not a bad thing, especially if your dreams are backed up by action. And yours are definitely backed up. Think about it. More than 6 months ago, you were a naive, little country girl. I'm sorry, but you were. Now, you're a young, confident mum-to-be who works at the hottest fashion house in the city. That's quite a leap. Second of all, you have some kind of fashion show at the end of winter. Maybe you can prove yourself there, at least as a model." Erin thought for a moment. "Maybe you're right. If I can be useful to Cassandra in creating her maternity collection, maybe she'll notice my efforts." "Great. What other news do you have?" "Nothing else," replied Erin. But she was lying. Yesterday, Erin saw her mother. Latrice had sent her to pick up a box with terribly expensive, exclusive costume jewellery for a new photo shoot. "You're not a stupid girl," she said to Erin, "but just to clear my conscience, if you lose it, Cassandra will take 3 hides, and she won't care that you're pregnant." "Understood," Erin nodded. The valuable cargo had to be picked up from a luxury shopping centre. The brand representatives had an office there. Erin had not been here before, and she was curious to see the expensive boutiques, the elegant fountain on the first floor, the beautifully dressed customers. She used to think that all rich women dressed very stylishly, but now she realised that only 2 out of 10 women seemed tastefully dressed. Erin took the box without any problems and decided to go downstairs on the big transparent elevator. It travelled slowly, stopping at each floor, so there was an opportunity to look a little more at the new world of wealth for her. On the 7th floor, a whole flock of very young girls entered, all with many bags. Erin pressed herself against the transparent back wall of the elevator and turned to face it to continue her observations. Suddenly, a woman caught her attention. She was coming out of some boutique, accompanied by two tall, almost identical men in black, obviously security guards. The woman was wearing a light white dress. Her luxurious blonde hair flowed easily over her shoulders, and her large blue eyes looked somewhere thoughtful in the distance. Erin recognized her at once. It was her mother. Although she hadn't seen her for more than 10 years, she hadn't changed at all. Erin's heart pounded and her legs gave out, and she almost dropped the precious box. The elevator passed very close to the place where the dazzling beauty in white stood with her guards, and for a moment Erin thought that her mother looked at her and even recognized her. On her face flashed either amazement or fear. But the elevator, all the way up to this barely crawling, here as if by chance, flew downward with an arrow and did not stop until the first floor. The girls with the bags got out and Erin followed them. She didn't know what to do. Should she rush back upstairs and start looking for her mother all over the mall? Suddenly, the nausea hit her, and she almost ran to the exit for fresh air. On the street she felt a little better, and she was already hesitating. Maybe this woman just looked alike. Especially, Erin had only seen her for a few seconds. Most likely her brain, flooded with hormones and suffering from hypoxia in the stuffy elevator, saw blonde hair, blue eyes, and slipped her the belief she wanted to believe. Nevertheless, this episode now constantly rose before Erin's eyes. Toward the end of January, Erin began to realize for the first time that she was pregnant. No, psychologically she understood it, but with her body, she felt only periodic movements of her daughter, and that was all. What the other girls told her about swelling, fatigue, weakness had bypassed her. But now she became slower. She didn't want to get up early. It became harder to put on her shoes in the afternoon. She wanted to lie down. Jill noticed it first. "Okay, Erin, you need to regroup your strength," she said. "Focus on work and do less housework." "Who's going to take care of the house then? You work all the time too. Why don't we invite Melissa to visit us for a month or two?" Jill met Erin's stepmother when she went with her friend to the village to celebrate Christmas. She charmed everyone there. Dave, it seems, literally fell in love with her and even regretted that he had to leave for a shift in a few days. The stepmother was unusually lively and friendly to the pregnant stepdaughter, showing unexpected warmth and care. Even the father became a little less glum than usual. Melissa, Erin tried to imagine her stepmother in a city apartment. She won't go. She has a household there, and the father won't let her go. She doesn't like the city, and she doesn't like me. Her friend smiled slyly and averted her eyes. Erin knew when Jill had that look. "Are you two already making a deal behind my back?" she asked, astounded. "Well, not exactly made a deal," Jill answered evasively, "but before we left, there was such a conversation. I told her she could stay in my apartment if she wanted a break from country life. She didn't mind. She was worried about you, by the way." Yes, some help wouldn't hurt, but Erin didn't really want to accept it from her stepmother, though there was no other options anyway. Okay, let her come. Inside, she had already prepared herself for the stepmother to pester her with reproaches, unsolicited advice, and opinions that Erin was doing everything wrong. But to her surprise, for the first 2 or 3 weeks the guest was quieter than water, but her help was very noticeable. Now, Erin could afford to get up an hour later. Breakfast and the container with lunch were already waiting for her on the table. In the evening, she and Jill would return to the clean, cosy apartment, even from the stairwell, smelling the scent of homemade pies, or potatoes with mushrooms, or duck baked according to an old recipe. "Yes, Melissa, we can't lose weight with you," Jill said cheerfully to her once during dinner. "By the way, How do you know such recipes? Erin wondered. Melissa shrugged. Jill showed me how to look for things on the internet. I know that girls now take care of their figures, and I read that it's not good for pregnant women to gain too much weight. It makes labour difficult and affects the baby negatively. So I started searching for delicious and healthy food recipes. Thank you, said Erin sincerely. The stepmother seemed slightly embarrassed, her cheeks turning slightly pink. She habitually waved her hand away. What else should I do here all day long? Putting things in order, going to the store. It takes 2 hours. It's boring just sitting around all day, so I'm looking for recipes. The stepmother suddenly started revealing herself to Erin from another side. It was hard to understand what had changed, whether she was finally resting from the hard village life and her silent husband, or whether Erin had grown up and Melissa no longer felt the need to teach her about life. It turned out that her stepmother was a very caring and gentle woman, thinking about others almost more than herself. However, Erin suddenly realised that she had always been like that. She had never deprived her stepdaughter of anything. She had never given her less than her own son Dave. Most likely, she just didn't know how to express her love and give affection, something that a little girl growing up without a mother desperately needed. Now she was interested in Erin's life and work. At first, she secretly listened to Erin telling Jill something. Then she started sitting next to them and eventually asked the meaning of words she didn't understand. For Jill, Melissa became like a friend. They somehow easily found a common language, and with Jill's encouragement, the woman began to read books, watch movies, and they even went for walks together if Erin was busy. The day of Cassandra's spring fashion show had arrived. The whole previous week had merged into one endlessly long, hectic day for Erin. She probably wouldn't have survived without Melissa's magic soups and chicken cutlets. While it seemed that everything was going according to schedule, and Erin expected to have a couple of days to rest before the show, the experienced Latrice immediately told her that it wouldn't be the case. You'll see, Cassandra will have a meltdown in a few days. She'll be thrashing around like a tornado, tearing everyone and everything to shreds, and screaming that everything is wrong. Get ready. Erin couldn't believe it. Cassandra looked absolutely calm, but everything happened just as Latrice had predicted. Exactly 1 week later, Erin walked into the studio as usual, bringing the last 2 boxes of shoes, and barely dodged a purse flying past her face. "No!" cried Cassandra. "This is all entirely wrong. It's horrible. This was a failed idea from the start. They will look like cows in those dresses. No one's going to buy it. My career will end at this show. The house will go bankrupt, and this place will be turned into a beer bar." Judging by the aides huddled in the corners, Cassandra had been raging for a long time. Only Latrice stood firmly near her boss, apparently trying to say something. Erin clenched her palms into fists for courage and walked over to her boss with an innocent smile. "Cassandra, let's try it on me now," she suggested in a sweet voice. "We'll see what's wrong right away. There's plenty of time to make adjustments." The woman lit a cigarette. "What's there possible to adjust? There's only one way. Put all these rags in a pile and set them on fire." Latrice glanced quickly at the other assistants, and they, as if on cue, began praising Cassandra's genius. She pursed her lips capriciously and rolled her eyes like a little girl. "You're all sycophants," she barked, but it was obvious that the flattery had worked. "Okay, Erin, put on those overalls over there." As Erin changed and walked down the makeshift catwalk, Cassandra's face became even grimmer than usual. "Something's wrong," she said, "but I can't figure out what it is." Erin regained her courage and said, "The belt is unnecessary. It seems like it should emphasize the waist, except that I don't have one, and it ridiculously divides the figure into 2 uneven parts. If you take it off, the look will be softer and smoother." Cassandra said, and in a few ruthless moments, she ripped away the sewn-in belt. "Yes, it's better now." After that, they made adjustments to the entire collection in the remaining time. But despite this, Erin still had a growing excitement. It was scary to imagine that she, a girl from the village in her late stages of pregnancy, would be going on the runway in front of a full audience. "What do you have to be afraid of?" Latrice encouraged her. "Your boss is a beast, and you're not afraid of her. And walking on the catwalk is just a walk. I'm sorry, but this is Cassandra's night, not your recital. You'll be looked at as one of many models, nothing more. But they'll examine every one of Cassandra's designs under a microscope, looking for flaws and scrutinizing every detail." Erin was reassured by this. Indeed, her role was to go out 3 times, walk along the path with a series of similar pregnant girls, among whom they weren't even professional models, and then quietly go to rest. But Cassandra would have to endure all the critics, competitors, journalists, and those who wanted to express their opinions. Jill and Melissa came to support the young debutante. As a thank you, Erin herself prepared their outfits for the show. Jill wore a long emerald green dress that complemented her curly red hair, and her stepmother wore an elegant light beige suit pant. She even straightened her back, and no one would now think that this woman had lived in the village all her life. Erin didn't even remember her first appearance. The hall in front of her eyes merged into one big blur, and she only mechanically stepped over her feet and maintained a trained smile on her face. When she came backstage, Latrice hugged her tightly. "Erin, you're a smart girl. That was wonderful. Quickly, change for the second walk." The second time was already a little calmer. She even spotted Jill and her stepmother in the 3rd row with her eyes and smiled at them. At the same time, a vague uneasiness came over her. Erin didn't understand what caused it. Her stomach didn't ache, so it definitely wasn't related to the baby. It seemed like she saw something. But what? "Erin, change your clothes quickly, you're closing the show," Latrice shouted to her. For the 3rd time, even though she was the last to go, Erin was absolutely confident. The show was almost over, and judging by Cassandra's satisfied face, everything had gone great. The audience's reaction made it clear that they were enjoying everything. Erin's eyes glanced at the front row, and she almost tripped when she saw a fragile blonde in a dazzling black dress. It was her! There could be no doubt now. Her mother was looking right at her. Erin didn't realize how she didn't faint or drop everything and run to her right off the stage. On autopilot, the girl finished her walk, remaining on stage with the rest of the models. She even seemed to clap and smile when Cassandra came out, and the audience greeted her with a round of applause. But Erin herself didn't take her eyes off the woman in the front row. Her mother recognized her. She certainly did. Barely waiting for them to get off the stage, Erin ran without even changing her clothes. The guests from the show moved to the next room, where the buffet was to take place. The girl squeezed among the guests. Someone recognized her, said compliments, but she heard nothing, looking for familiar blonde hair and a black dress in the crowd. "Mum!" she finally cried out. There was no doubt now. She hadn't changed much in 12 years, but maybe her cheekbones had gotten a little sharper, her gaze a little harder. "Erin?" the woman said cautiously and lightly touched her arm. She looked more frightened than pleased. "Did you recognize me, Mum?" Erin asked cheerfully. "Of course, my girl. How could I not recognize my baby, even though you have grown up?" The mother nodded at Erin's belly with a smile. "You're getting ready to become a mother. I was hoping you wouldn't have it as early as I did." "Early?" Erin asked, perplexed. Her mother looked away, apparently not wanting to draw unnecessary attention to them. Somewhere in the distance she could see vaguely familiar silhouettes of men dressed in black. Erin remembered them as the security guards who had been with her mother at the mall back then. "Let's step back a little," the mother asked affectionately. They walked through the halls and out onto a covered balcony where it was warm and empty. The mother sighed, rubbed her temples, and seemingly determined to tell everything, began. "I wasn't even 18 when you were born. I told Sean about the pregnancy right after the wedding. He figured out the truth later." "The truth?" Erin asked, and then she realized. "I'm not his daughter, right?" The mother lowered her eyes. "Yes, I was very young, stupid and spoiled back then. My parents are very wealthy people, and they never denied me anything. That must have played a part. When I became a teenager, I suddenly started showing my rebellious side, drinking, smoking, going out with different bad guys. And then one day, for reasons I can't remember, I had a fight with my parents. I decided to run away from home and start a new life. I found a new boyfriend, and we started renting an apartment. I had money. Then I found out I was pregnant, and that's when I met Sean. He was so simple, so honest, entirely different from the guys I had been with before. I thought the universe was sending me a sign. I went away with him to a village so my parents wouldn't find me. We got married, and then you were born." "And then?" Erin asked in a completely dry voice. Her mother looked at her guiltily and immediately averted her eyes. "I couldn't live there. The youthful fervour ran out quickly. I realized I was still too young to be anyone's wife, let alone a mother." She suddenly took her daughter's hand, and Erin barely held back from pulling her hand away. "I tried, honestly," the mother continued. "You should know how much I convinced myself to stay. Every night when you and Sean fell asleep, I looked at you and said, 'Here they are, my family, my husband, my child.' But I felt nothing. You were like guards keeping me in a cage I couldn't escape from." "Like guards?" Erin asked, feeling tears running down her cheeks. "And one day I just ran away," her mother continued, as if not hearing her. "At first I wanted to leave a note to explain everything to you and Sean, but I couldn't find the words." "But why didn't you even send a card on my birthday for 12 years?" asked Erin quietly. Her mother lowered her head. "Did you go back to your parents?" Erin asked, without getting the answer on her previous question. "Yes." "You didn't tell them about me?" "No." "Do you know who my real father is?" The mother shrugged. "Honestly, I don't really remember anymore. I was going through a rough patch back then, and after I came back to the city, I didn't see anyone else of those friends." "Do you live with your parents now?" The woman shook her head negatively, saying very quietly, "No, with my husband. He's a very wealthy man and very jealous." Then she bit her lower lip and added in a kind of pathetic, pleading tone, "I'd hate for him to find out about you. You wouldn't give me away, would you?" Erin shook her head in the negative. Her mother suddenly perked up and smiled as if a wonderful idea had occurred to her. "If you like, I'll be sure to introduce you to your grandparents. Yes, and you and I can see each other whenever you want." But looking back at the guards, she added, "Well, maybe not very often. But I can call or write you sometimes." "Is that what you want, Mum?" Erin asked bluntly and looked her in the eye. Her mother looked both guilty and frightened at the same time. Erin suddenly realized that now her mother was not at all happy to see her. Maybe in the first minute she was happy because she thought that now she would remove the burden of guilt that had been on her shoulders for so many years. But now she seemed more afraid of what her rich new husband would think of her. Currently, Erin looked away and noticed her stepmother through the glass door of the balcony. Melissa seemed to be searching for her, appearing anxious. Suddenly, Melissa turned her head and their eyes met, bringing relief to her stepmother's face. And Erin was reminded of a time when she was 11 years old and had caught the flu. Her temperature had risen to 40 degrees, and her stepmother had stayed by her side for 3 days, tirelessly wiping her with a wet towel, giving her raspberry drinks and broths, and placing her cool palm on her forehead. She also recalled their trip to a neighbouring town to find the perfect fabric for her graduation dress. They had spent half a day at the market until finally finding it. Erin felt embarrassed when her stepmother haggled vigorously, eventually lowering the price. It was only after paying that Erin realized her stepmother had used her last bit of money for the purchase. Without the negotiation, they wouldn't have been able to afford it. Where had her biological mother been all these years? She had chosen not to involve her parents, even keeping them unaware of their role as grandparents. Her mother had never grown up, playing the role of a carefree girl. When she grew bored, she left her husband and easily removed her daughter from her life, just as a careless student tears out a spoiled sheet from a notebook. Then she returned to her parents, pretending to be an innocent girl who had misbehaved. Finally, she found a new husband who now protected and treated her as if she were still a little girl. How had Erin been so blind throughout her life? "You will find your mother twice more, first falsely, then for real." Erin remembered those words clearly now. She opened the glass door and walked towards her stepmother. There were things Melissa was going to say, but before she could, Erin tightly embraced her. "What are you doing?" Melissa asked fearfully, gently stroking Erin's back. "We were worried about you." "You were talking to someone. Who was it?" "Nobody," Erin replied firmly. "Nobody." "Nice name you picked out for your daughter, after all. The name Holly suits her very well," Melissa said contentedly, pushing the stroller with her granddaughter along the park path. Erin smiled. Holly was growing up to be a calm and sweet girl at just 3 months old. Erin had already started working again, leaving her newborn daughter in the care of her grandmother. Occasionally, Erin took her daughter to work with her. Cassandra decided to develop a children's clothing line and invited Erin to take part in the development. "I think that's a great idea, don't you?" her boss calmly said. "After the spring show, we practically dominated the market for pregnant women. It's logical that they would now want to dress their children with our brand too." But she understood that she couldn't have done it without Melissa's help, and she was truly grateful to her for that. However, it seemed that Melissa enjoyed it too. Sometimes the woman would return to her own home to check on her husband and the house, but she would always come back within a week. "Doesn't your husband miss you?" Jill once asked her. Melissa shrugged. "He was never emotionally attached to me, even when we got married. He used to say, 'I help you raise your son and you help me raise my daughter. We share household responsibilities. That's all our love is. I am certain he doesn't miss me.'" In the city, Melissa felt better and enjoyed taking walks with Erin and her little granddaughter in the park. One day, a woman admired a beautiful black Mercedes on the opposite side of the street. Erin looked at it and felt a shiver. The car seemed strangely familiar to her. A moment later, a tall and handsome man with piercing dark eyes stepped out of the Mercedes, accompanied by a long-legged brunette in a short dress. Erin recognized him instantly, but to her surprise she no longer felt anything for Joshua. "Don't go back to the past, look to the future." She remembered the elderly woman's words. She smiled, turning away from the car, and pushed the stroller deeper into the park.